Hello everybody, Andrew Casey at Hypersanity Audiobooks. I'm touching on 20 wonderful reasons why you should or should not go through or listen to so many self-help books. And there are some different consequences to consider, and I'll touch on one point at the end that I think is a good reason to why you should listen to and read some self-help books, but also make sure you get on with doing what you need to do to accomplish your goals. But for now, we'll just get into it. Number 1, accessibility. A lot of self-help books are accessible. Some are in certain public libraries, some are not too expensive on audiobook. There's also an accessibility where some are actually rather cheap and go through some good homes. Number 2, empowerment. Some self-help books are to teach you to be empowered. I'm currently, after reading Bruce Campbell's book, Hail to the Chins, I'm now going through the audiobook, Unfuck Your Mind. And I think this is a good book if you want to learn on how to use your mind and your thought process to empower yourself to not be so caught up in overthinking, especially if you're running on anxiety, like our little orange friend from Inside Out 2.
What do you think you're doing? Riley's life is more complex now. It requires more sophisticated emotions than all of you.
You madam?
You can't just bottle us up. Oh, that's a great idea.
Personal development. One of the ideas of personal development is to improve on what you already know or what you're needing to learn within whatever industry that you're in. So if you look at finance books, there are a lot of finance gurus that are actual finance gurus like Robert Kiyosaki who have read a lot of different finance books. Or, as he said, with real estate, he has read a lot of books on real estate and taken countless real estate courses to keep improving on what he does. Mental health benefits. There are plenty of mental health benefits for reading self-help books. There are certain subject matters where some people deal with certain problems and listening to multiple stories or case studies on certain situations, such as narcissistic abuse, to learn how to overcome it within your own life. Or there are different books on how to write. I do read a lot of writing books from various authors to always improve on my writing. Motivation. I find there's a lot of motivation, especially now after I've learned more why we should listen to audiobooks or listen to certain podcasters or Hypersanity books, Hypersanity books for kids, or Hypersanity audiobooks. We try to create good content and engaging content. And there are certain questions and queries. We don't mind your comments coming into this channel. We welcome them. Number 6, community. I like to have a good community within the YouTube channels, and I also am open to comments as previously mentioned. But within certain self-help books, there are some who have bigger communities promoting their book and their testimony of what they're promoting. And some communities may be good for you. I'm not too big on bigger communities. I like to stick to some smaller communities. Number 7, goal setting. There are certain self-help books that teach different ways on how to set goals and organize your day. However, I also see the downside where there's a lot of low content books that are mostly diagrams and graphs on how to organize your day, and there's no information within the books, being low content. So I will stress this point. Do not send me low content books and harass me for 5-star reviews. And also within anyone else that works within Hypersanity books, we are not going to review low content books. Number 8, flexibility. I primarily listen to audiobooks while driving the car and not in heavy flow of traffic, just different time zones, periods where I work and don't need to be distracted or anything else while driving. I don't take that type of risk. Also, when I'm walking the dogs, I walk the dogs and listen to audiobooks. However, if I run into any sort of trouble, like a dog being loose, I am prepared for that situation to look after my 2 dogs over someone else's dog. However, the main thing I do with the flexibility, remove myself from the situation and get on with living. Number 9, cost effective. Depending on the problem you're trying to resolve, sometimes seeing a counselor or a therapist psychologist might be the way to go to help you solve more personal problems. And sometimes there are certain self-help books in conjunction to the proper help to solve a problem you're trying to solve. Sometimes it's just also cost effective to seek information on certain subject matters than to pay for bigger professional services, such as within the finance niche. Sometimes it just depends what problem you're trying to solve, though professional consultations are also helpful, as well as the other option of self-help books to gather information. It's just one of those things to decide for yourself. Number 10, awareness. Sometimes there's an awareness within a subject matter that you're researching. I'm currently going through this self-help book, Go Your Mind. And with this self-help book, I also find there is a lot of information, especially on neuro pathways and how we can reprogram our mind just from our thought process. And a lot of the book may be written in a way that feels simple when you consider a lot of our big problems can be broken down into simpler resolutions, especially the aftermath of a certain crisis. You decide how that voice is in your head going to help you to overcome and move forward with your life, or how you may fall into some bad habits and repetitious cycles. It is your own responsibility to find some level of awareness of yourself. Number 11, simplified. Some content should not be simplified depending on your situation. Therefore, there are some self-help books that are too simplified. Same with, as I said before, low content books. And again, too simple. Do not send them to us. Number 12, lack of regulation. And I am not completely against the self-publishing industry. I do agree with a lot of self-publishing, though there is certain information that can be misinformation because there is a lack of regulation in whether a book should or should not be published on its subject matter. There is some books I have looked at where there are certain mistakes within what is presented. Number 13, multi-level marketing. Now I'm going to touch on this one. I was in Amway years ago, and like a lot of that type of thing, there are false hopes, or there is a lot of self-help thrown in your direction. Back in the day, it was signing up to Book of the Month and a 1-hour CD or tape every week to listen to a speaker. And there are a lot of false hopes within the industry because your hopes are put into one way of making money, not multiple sources of income. And sometimes people can diversify too much, too early, and try to make something work in business models. So I think there is a lot of unfortunate false hopes within multi-level marketing. So that's something to always consider with your situation. Who is selling the product to you? Number 14, dependency. I found the same thing. I was consuming one self-help book, moving on to the next, and I was consuming so much content 20 years ago. It was quite frightening the amount of ways I was consuming content and listening to speakers talk about their inflated lifestyles. And just like the show On Becoming a God in Central Florida, it was an eye-opener because within that show to multi-level marketing, one person was successful, same with one other person in another territory, but within everyone else, they weren't living the lifestyle that they were claiming to live, and there was a lot of false testimony within that situation. And that's where the self-help can unfortunately be terrible when it comes to a certain dependency on the certain content that's provided. 15, dissatisfied. Where again, when you're consuming too much content, you're dissatisfied. The idea of the self-help industry is to help with certain problems. There are some parts where it is $1 billion industry, and the idea is not to be content with your life, to keep spending money and absorbing more content. And I found that was interesting looking back at what happened with Amway to certain things that happen today with people buying courses and different programs when some of the content that they're seeking is actually online for free, or it hasn't been created yet. Hopefully within this channel, touching on audiobooks and on certain content, I hope I do provide value for you today. If so, Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and please do comment on the videos. They do help the algorithm, and it also helps us to build the community further into the type of content that you're looking for. Number 16, blame. Sometimes there is a certain perspective that's not seen. Not every method that works for someone will work for another. Sometimes it's finding your own 2 feet what works for you. I have found, however, with certain self-help books, when they do talk about implying your own situation to the content created and asking yourself different questions that they have not provided within the context, that's the type of book that is helping you think, and that's the type of book that is good to read. Number 17, what book should you read? Well, that's interesting. You look at something like within the finance industry, I would say anything Robert Kiyosaki and you're going to be okay. There are other finance books that have a lot of good content, and there are others that may have good content but may not be applicable to you. So there are certain books where sometimes you just need to look at certain channels that touch on that type of subject matter. However, there are different professionals that also talk about the books and certain advice within the books, whether it will apply to you or not. Sometimes it's just taking that leap of faith to see it for yourself. 18. Overwhelmed. Sometimes it is overwhelming to consume too much content and try to work out what is best. Therefore, sometimes when it comes to self-help, I do think 1 book a month is fine. But again, it depends on how you feel with situations. I currently read at least in a month 4 to 6 books. I do listen to 1 or 2 audiobooks, and then everything else is either YouTube mostly and the occasional podcast, because there are areas of the brain that work well while reading, and there's areas of the brain that work a bit differently by listening to good content. 19. Skepticism. Sometimes people are skeptical of certain books because they think it's just out for a money grab, which in a lot of cases, yes, someone's got to make a living, and thinking it's all bad content. One thing, I come back to another argument. Sometimes there's a lot of subject matter to discuss early in a relationship, and people do grow and change, and sometimes new information presented, we look at things differently. And it's the same with self-help. Are we looking at self-help to work out on who we are as a person to improve ourselves, or have we been challenged by something to become skeptical of what is good content and what is not? 20. Reading the same book other people have read. I have had book recommendations that other people have reviewed on their YouTube channels and come to a quick collaboration. Most of the collaboration is just watching someone's video and vice versa. There are other book groups that may be good for self-help. There are certain programs such as anger management groups that actually watch the TV show Keeping Up Appearances to understand Mrs. Bouquet, to see how to cope with different problems that we face. And by being a bit more of a friendlier demeanor, it's a bit different following from her difficult ways compared to another male or female that's a bit more frightening in personality. So there are certain ways that self-help do work, especially in group settings. But again, I mostly go through a book that I like and post it on this channel, and other people say that they like it or recommend something else. It's part of sharing within different communities that I think self-help has its way to be. And within Hypersanity Audiobooks, I will touch on certain self-help videos that I'm going to do on audiobooks, because I think it's an industry that is underappreciated, and I think there is some good valuable content depending on your circumstance. 21. Final thoughts. Action faking. It's where you're absorbing so much self-help to the point that you've only convinced yourself that you've done something when in reality you did nothing at all. And that is the downfall of too much self-help, is action faking. So think about what you are listening to with audiobooks for self-help and what action you're putting into the future ahead. That's it for today. Hit like, subscribe, and please do comment. I am looking forward to some more audiobook recommendations, especially within self-help. and I will review some more on this channel, including Go Your Mind. But that is another story.